boy returns from death with a shocking message from heaven. The rain hammered against my windshield as I raced down Pacific Coast Highway toward my engagement party. Marcus had texted twice already, playfully threatening to start without me. I smiled, thinking about the ring box burning a hole in my jacket pocket. After 15 years of fighting for acceptance, we were finally going to make it official. That's when I saw her little girl in a pink dress, chasing a red balloon across the slick road. Time slowed to a crawl. My hands jerked the wheel hard to the right. The world spun, metal screamed, and glass shattered. As my Mercedes crashed through the guardrail, I caught one last glimpse of her face. Something about those eyes. They seemed hauntingly familiar. The car rolled once, twice, 3 times down the cliff. In those eternal seconds, fragments of memories flashed before me. Sarah's tearful face 15 years ago when I convinced her to terminate our pregnancy, the countless patients I'd manipulated into unnecessary surgeries, Marcus's smile this morning as he kissed me goodbye. Then came the impact. I found myself floating above the chaos. A team of doctors, my colleagues from St. Mary's, worked frantically over my broken body. The irony wasn't lost on me. The famous Dr. Zachary Collins, who'd built an empire mocking faith and spirituality, was now having an out-of-body experience. "We're losing him," Dr. Peterson shouted, his hands covered in my blood. I watched, detached, as they used the defibrillator once, twice, 3 times. A young paramedic in the corner was praying quietly, his lips moving in desperate supplication to a God I'd spent years ridiculing. The monitor flatlined. My friend Dr. Sarah Chen, her voice breaking, called it time of death. 7:23 p.m. as the team stepped back, defeated. Something changed. The harsh fluorescent lights of the trauma room began to fade, replaced by a radiance I can't describe in human terms. It wasn't just brightness, it was pure, living light that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. The last thing I heard was Dr. Peterson's whispered words, "My God, he was supposed to get married tomorrow." Then the hospital scene dissolved, and I felt myself being drawn upward into that extraordinary light, toward an encounter that would shatter everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the nature of reality itself. "Zachary," a voice called, filled with such authority and love that my soul trembled in recognition. I knew with absolute certainty that I was about to meet the one I'd denied my entire life. If this glimpse into my extraordinary journey has stirred something in your soul, don't let this moment slip away. Join our community of seekers and subscribe to witness the full revelation of how one fateful evening transformed a hardened skeptic forever. Before my encounter with death, I was Dr. Zachary Collins, a name synonymous with luxury and perfection in Beverly Hills. At 42, I'd built California's most prestigious chain of cosmetic surgery clinics, a self-made success story that Forbes loved to feature. My face graced magazine covers, my name topped medical journals, and my bank account boasted numbers that made other surgeons envious. But more than that, I was known as the celebrity surgeon who dared to be different, openly gay, proudly atheist, and unapologetically controversial. I grew up in a conservative family in small-town Nebraska, where my father pastored the local Baptist church and my mother taught Sunday school. They had great plans for me: seminary school, marriage to a nice Christian girl, following in my father's footsteps. But I had different ideas. From an early age, I knew I was different. While other boys played football, I studied anatomy books. While my parents prayed for souls, I dreamed of transforming bodies. The final break came during my 2nd year of medical school when I came out to my parents. "No son of mine will live in sin," my father had declared, his face red with shame and anger. My mother just wept, clutching her Bible as if it could shield her from the truth of who I was. They gave me an ultimatum: change or leave. I chose freedom. That night I made 2 vows: I would become so successful they'd have to acknowledge me, and I would never let any divine authority dictate my life again. I threw myself into my studies with fierce determination, graduating top of my class from Harvard Medical School. During my residency at Mass General, I met Marcus Bennett, brilliant, ambitious, and as determined as I was to prove something to the world. Together we built an empire. Starting with one small clinic in Beverly Hills, we expanded to 7 locations across California. Our specialty wasn't just physical transformation, it was selling dreams. We pioneered what we called holistic aesthetic enhancement, combining surgical expertise with psychological manipulation. I became known for my brutal honesty, telling wealthy clients exactly what was wrong with them and how much it would cost to fix it. The irony was I was good at it, exceptionally good. My surgical skills were legendary, and my eye for aesthetic perfection was unmatched. But it was more than that. I understood people's insecurities because I carried so many of my own. Every nose I refined, every face I lifted, every body I sculpted was a middle finger to the God who, according to my parents, had made everyone perfect in His image. I took particular pleasure in operating on religious clients. They'd come to me nervous, quoting scripture about their bodies being temples. I'd smile and ask them why they thought their God had made them imperfect if He was so divine. By the time I finished with them, they'd be thanking me instead of their deity for their transformation. Marcus and I became the power couple of the medical world. Our relationship was splashed across social media, featured in LGBTQ magazines, and held up as an example of success against all odds. We donated generously to progressive causes, spoke at Pride events, and never missed an opportunity to challenge religious conservatives. Our love story became a symbol of defiance against traditional values. What no one knew was the price of our success. The corners we cut, the patients we pressured, the lives we altered, not always for the better. There was Sarah, my college girlfriend, whom I'd convinced to terminate her pregnancy because a baby would have derailed my career plans. There were the countless patients who didn't really need surgery but had the money to pay for it. There were the young doctors whose idealism I crushed, teaching them that medicine was a business first, a calling second. I had it all: wealth, fame, respect or fear, which I considered the same thing, and a man who loved me. In 2 days, Marcus and I were finally going to make it official with a wedding that would make headlines across the country. The old guard of Beverly Hills medicine would have to attend, gritting their teeth as two men exchanged vows. My parents would see it in the news and know that their prayers for my redemption had failed. Yes, I had it all, and then I died for 7 minutes and 23 seconds. Those minutes changed everything. Collins Bennett Aesthetic Institute wasn't just a medical practice, it was an empire built on perfection. Our flagship clinic in Beverly Hills looked more like a 7-star hotel than a hospital, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a rooftop helipad for our most exclusive clients. The waiting rooms served champagne instead of coffee, and our consultation rooms featured custom-designed leather chairs that cost more than most cars. My office was a testament to scientific atheism. Instead of the usual medical degrees and certifications, though those covered one wall, I displayed an extensive collection of ancient anatomical drawings. My favorite was a 16th century dissection sketch showing how little mankind understood about the human body before science stripped away religious superstition. When religious patients commented on the macabre artwork, I'd smile and remind them that their God-given bodies were just biological machines infinitely perfectible by human hands. Our business model was brutally effective. Initial consultations were free, but they were masterpieces of psychological manipulation. I'd sit with patients for hours, carefully noting every flaw they mentioned. Then, using our state-of-the-art imaging technology, I'd show them how many imperfections they'd missed. By the time I finished, they'd be begging for my help, ready to spend their life savings or go into debt for the chance to be perfect. The team I assembled was handpicked not just for their surgical skills, but for their ability to sell. Dr. Jennifer Maxwell, our head of body contouring, was a former beauty queen who could convince anyone they needed liposuction. Dr. David Chen specialized in Asian eyelid surgery, exploiting cultural insecurities with surgical precision. We weren't just changing bodies, we were engineering insecurities into profit. Our marketing was aggressive and unapologetic. God made you, we perfect you was our unofficial slogan, guaranteed to offend religious sensibilities, while attracting those who shared our irreverent worldview. We sponsored pride parades, feminist conferences, and atheist conventions. Our social media campaigns were controversial enough to go viral, but scientific enough to deflect criticism. The money was astronomical. A basic consultation package started at $10,000. Full body transformations could run into millions. Insurance was a word we rarely used. Everything was private pay, cash preferred. We had a special department just to handle financing for patients who couldn't afford our services but were desperate enough to mortgage their futures for a new face. But there was a darker side to our success. The complications we didn't report. The patients whose expectations we couldn't meet, whose depression deepened after surgery instead of lifting. The young girls who became addicted to procedures, enabled by our generous loyalty program. We kept 2 sets of books, one for the medical board and one for reality. My relationship with other doctors was complicated. To their faces I was Dr. Collins, the innovative surgeon pushing the boundaries of his field. Behind their backs I mocked their cautious approaches and ethical concerns. I particularly enjoyed stealing patients from religious hospitals, turning their faith-based counseling into referrals for my practice. Marcus handled the business side, making sure our less ethical practices never came to light. He was brilliant at managing our image, turning potential scandals into publicity opportunities. When a patient died on our operating table, our 3rd that year, though the public only knew about one, he spun it into a campaign about the importance of surgical innovation and patient choice. I justified everything with results. Our patients' before and after photos were spectacular. Celebrities endorsed us. Medical students fought for our residency positions. If some patients regretted their choices or couldn't afford their payment plans, well, that was the price of perfection. I slept perfectly well in my Malibu beach house, lulled by the sound of waves and the knowledge that tomorrow would bring more desperate people willing to pay anything to escape their reflections. The morning of my accident, I performed 3 surgeries, a facelift on a 65-year-old former actress, rhinoplasty on a 16-year-old girl whose parents I'd convinced she needed it for her future, and a full-body lift on a recent divorcee. I was rushing to our engagement party because I'd scheduled an extra consultation, a wealthy televangelist's wife who'd finally decided that vanity was worth sinning for. I never made it to that consultation. Instead, I had an appointment with someone I couldn't manipulate, couldn't bill, and couldn't escape, and he had some questions about my practice. The light that enveloped me wasn't just brightness, it was pure consciousness, alive and aware. In its presence, all my carefully constructed defenses crumbled. I, who had spent years mocking near-death experiences as oxygen-deprived hallucinations, found myself in a realm that defied my scientific explanations. Zachary, the voice, spoke my name with such intimate knowledge that tears streamed down my spiritual face. I knew instantly it was Jesus, though he looked nothing like the paintings in my father's church. His presence was simultaneously terrifying and comforting, overwhelming yet somehow familiar. His eyes held such depth of love and understanding that I felt completely exposed, utterly known. "You've been running from me for a long time," he said, his voice resonating through my very being. There was no judgment in his tone, only an infinite sadness that broke something deep within me. In his presence I couldn't maintain my practiced cynicism. Every argument I'd ever made against faith, every mocking comment about believers, every prideful dismissal of spirituality seemed childish and hollow. Then he showed me my life, not as I'd presented it to the world, but as it truly was. I saw myself through his eyes, and through the eyes of every person I'd affected. I saw the 16-year-old girl whose mother had mortgaged their house for the surgery I convinced them she needed. I watched her spiral into depression, never satisfied with her appearance. Scheduling consultation after consultation, I felt her pain as my own. I saw Sarah, young and frightened, in that clinic 15 years ago. I felt her devastation when I told her our baby would ruin my career, handed her the cash for the procedure, and never contacted her again. I witnessed her crying alone at night, year after year, wondering about the child she never had. The weight of her grief nearly crushed me. The parade of faces continued. Patients I'd manipulated, colleagues I'd betrayed, families I'd helped destroy with my endless pursuit of perfection. Each memory was accompanied by perfect understanding, not just of what I'd done, but of the ripple effects of my actions through countless lives. I saw how my words had planted seeds of doubt in faithful hearts, how my mockery had wounded struggling believers, how my pursuit of physical perfection had fed spiritual starvation. "These are not shown to condemn you," Jesus said, his voice gentle despite the horror I felt. "They are shown so you can understand each revelation was accompanied by his perfect love, a love so pure and unconditional that it shattered my heart. How could he love me, knowing everything I'd done?" Then came the most devastating revelation. The little girl I'd swerved to avoid, she was mine. Sarah had lied about the abortion, had chosen to have our child alone rather than kill it as I'd demanded. The daughter I'd never known had been the instrument of my death, or perhaps my awakening. I fell to my knees in that realm of light, overwhelmed by the weight of truth. All my achievements, my wealth, my carefully maintained image meant nothing in the face of this reality. I had spent my life perfecting surfaces while corrupting souls, including my own. "Why show me this?" I managed to ask, my voice breaking. "Why not just let me die in my ignorance?" Jesus knelt beside me. The creator of the universe knelt beside me and placed his hand on my shoulder. The touch sent waves of love through my being. "Because I have a purpose for you, Zachary. Your understanding of human pain, your skill in speaking truth to power, even your experience of rejection, all of these can be transformed into instruments of healing." I looked into his eyes and saw my future, not a complete vision, but flashes of possibility. I saw myself using my influence for redemption rather than destruction. I saw healing that went deeper than skin, transformations that touched souls rather than just bodies. "Will you serve?" he asked simply. There was no pressure in his voice, only invitation. Even then, facing the full truth of my life, he left the choice to me. Before I could answer, I felt a pulling sensation. The light began to fade. "Your time for decision has not yet come," he said. "Remember what you've seen. Remember that you are loved." The pull back to my body felt like being dragged through a tunnel of memories, each one more revealing than the last. In those moments, Jesus showed me the true impact of my life's work, not through statistics or before and after photos, but through the hidden stories I'd never wanted to see. First came Mrs. Rodriguez, a cleaning lady who'd taken out 3 credit cards to afford the minor improvements I'd suggested. I watched her family spiral into debt, her marriage crumble under the financial strain. Her teenage daughter, witnessing her mother's transformation from a confident woman into a surgery-addicted shell, developed an eating disorder that nearly killed her. Then came Tyler, a young transgender man who'd come to me for top surgery. Instead of providing the simple procedure he needed, I'd convinced him he required extensive facial reconstruction and body contouring. He'd trusted me as an LGBTQ advocate, never suspecting I was exploiting his vulnerability for profit. His suicide note mentioned the crushing debt I'd saddled him with. The revelations grew more personal. I saw Marcus, my beloved fiancé, in secret meetings with our competitors, planning to sell our patient data. The accident hadn't been entirely accidental. The brake lines in my car had been subtly tampered with. The little girl in the road had been an unexpected variable in a carefully orchestrated plan. Each revelation came with perfect clarity of understanding. I felt the pain of parents who'd refinanced their homes to pay for their children's surgeries, the anguish of patients who'd developed permanent complications, the despair of those who'd discovered that physical perfection couldn't fill their spiritual void. Most devastating was the revelation about Dr. Patricia Miller, a former colleague who'd threatened to expose our unethical practices. I'd systematically destroyed her reputation, planted false evidence of malpractice, and watched with satisfaction as she lost her license. A month later, she died by suicide, leaving behind 3 young children. I felt the full weight of her despair, saw her children growing up wondering why their mother had abandoned them. The memories shifted to my own family. I watched my mother, after I'd left home, crying herself to sleep every night while clutching my childhood photos. My father, despite his harsh words, had secretly followed my career, keeping a hidden folder of every article written about me. Their rejection of my sexuality had been driven not by hatred but by genuine, if misguided, fear for my soul. Jesus showed me the ripple effects of my public atheism. Young believers influenced by my mockery of faith, abandoning their spiritual foundations. Patients leaving my office not just physically altered but spiritually wounded, their faith in a loving Creator eroded by my clever arguments about human imperfection. The most painful revelation was about Sarah and our child. I saw Sarah's courage in choosing life despite my abandonment, working multiple jobs to support our daughter. Emma, that was her name, had grown into a beautiful, compassionate 7-year-old who prayed every night for the father she'd never met. The red balloon she'd been chasing across the road had been a birthday gift from her mother. Through it all, I felt Jesus' unwavering love. Even as he showed me the worst of my actions, his presence radiated acceptance and possibility. This wasn't about punishment, it was about understanding. Each revelation, however painful, came wrapped in the promise of redemption. Your gift for transformation is real, his voice echoed through the memories. But you've been using it to corrupt rather than heal, to profit rather than serve. The final vision was of my own soul, a complex tapestry of light and shadow. The darkness wasn't just my actions, it was the pain and fear that had driven them. My desperate need to prove myself, my fear of vulnerability, my rejection of divine love, all were visible in that spiritual X-ray. As the visions faded and I felt myself being pulled back toward my broken body, one truth remained crystal clear: I had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at purpose. The question was, would I have the courage to take it? The steady beeping of heart monitors slowly pulled me back to consciousness. The sterile smell of hospital disinfectant replaced the divine fragrance of Jesus' presence. My eyelids felt heavy, but I forced them open, only to squint against the harsh fluorescent lighting so different from the warm radiance I'd just experienced. Dr. Sarah Chen, my friend and colleague, was adjusting my IV when she noticed I was awake. The look of relief on her face quickly shifted to concern. "Zach, can you hear me? You've been in a coma for 2 weeks." 2 weeks. The words hit me like a physical blow. The engagement party, the wedding, they would have come and gone. "Marcus," I managed to rasp through parched lips. Sarah's expression told me everything before she spoke. "He's gone, Zach. The day after your accident, he sold his shares in the practice to Meridian Healthcare Group. He cleaned out your joint accounts and disappeared. The police are looking into it, but..." She trailed off, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. The pain in my chest had nothing to do with my injuries. "The little girl," I whispered, dreading the answer. "The one in the road." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "She's fine, not a scratch. Her name is Emma. She's been asking about you." She hesitated, then added, "Her mother's been here every day praying in the chapel, she says. She says she knows you." The memories of my vision flooded back: Sarah from college, the pregnancy, my demands for an abortion. My daughter. The child I'd tried to erase had saved my life by nearly ending it. Divine irony at its finest. Over the next few hours, the full extent of what had happened during my 2-week absence became clear. Marcus hadn't just abandoned me, he'd systematically destroyed everything we'd built. He'd sold our medical records to Meridian, our biggest competitor, including the secret files documenting our less ethical practices. The medical board had launched an investigation. 3 class action lawsuits had already been filed. My personal accounts were drained, property sold, investments liquidated. Marcus had been planning this for months, using my own arrogance against me. I'd signed whatever he put in front of me, trusting him completely. Now I was not just broken physically, but financially ruined. The media was having a field day. "Celebrity surgeon in coma as empire crumbles" was the kindest headline. Others were more brutal: fraudulent practice exposed, queer power couples' dark secrets revealed, God's revenge, atheist doctors fall from grace. But none of that compared to the moment Sarah from college walked into my hospital room, holding the hand of a little girl with my eyes. Emma looked exactly as she had in my vision, a perfect blend of her mother's grace and my stubborn features. She carried a small teddy bear wearing scrubs. "The nurses said you make people beautiful," she said, placing the bear on my bedside table. "But Mommy says you're the one who needs healing now. I've been praying for you every night." I couldn't speak. The love and innocence in her eyes broke something in me that even Jesus' revelations hadn't fully cracked. This was my daughter, the one I'd rejected, whose very existence I'd tried to prevent. And here she was, offering me unconditional love and prayers. Sarah, my college Sarah, looked older but still beautiful, with a quiet strength I'd never appreciated before. "When I saw the news about your accident, I knew it was time," she said softly. "Emma's been asking about her father, and I think God had a plan in all of this." The word God didn't make me flinch as it once would have. Instead, I remembered the overwhelming love I'd experienced in Jesus' presence. Tears rolled down my cheeks, the first real tears I'd cried since leaving home 20 years ago. That evening, alone in my hospital room, I tried to pray for the first time since childhood. The words felt clumsy and inadequate. "I don't know how to do this anymore," I whispered into the darkness. "I don't even know if I have the right to try." The response wasn't a voice or a light this time, but a deep, settling peace, the same peace I'd felt in his presence. In that moment, I knew that my awakening wasn't just physical. Something fundamental had shifted in my soul. The next few weeks in the hospital became a crucible of transformation. Every day brought new revelations of Marcus's betrayal and my empire's collapse. Meridian Healthcare was systematically dismantling everything I'd built, exposing every unethical practice, every manipulated patient record, every covered-up complaint. My reputation wasn't just damaged, it was being destroyed with surgical precision. The LGBTQ community, which had once celebrated me as an icon, now branded me a traitor. Online forums buzzed with stories from patients I'd exploited, each revelation cutting deeper than my physical wounds. Former allies distanced themselves, and activists who'd once praised my advocacy now used me as an example of privilege and corruption. My medical license was suspended pending investigation. The procedures I'd pushed as necessary improvements were being reviewed, revealing a pattern of manipulation that made me sick to my stomach. Young patients I'd convinced to have multiple surgeries came forward with stories of body dysmorphia I'd deliberately exploited. The papers called me the Butcher of Beverly Hills. The religious community's response was mixed. Some saw my downfall as divine judgment, using my story as a cautionary tale from their pulpits. Others, to my surprise, reached out with genuine concern. A Catholic priest named Father Michael began visiting my hospital room, never preaching, just sitting quietly and offering comfort when the pain, physical or spiritual, became too much. My parents' response hit hardest. Mom called the hospital daily but couldn't bring herself to fly out from Nebraska. "I've been praying for you to find God for 20 years, she said, crying over the phone. But not like this, Zachary. Never like this, Dad remained silent in the background, his unspoken words echoing across the miles. The crisis of identity was overwhelming. Everything I'd used to define myself: successful surgeon, LGBTQ leader, wealthy businessman, proud atheist, had been stripped away. In their place was a broken man with a daughter he'd abandoned, a faith he'd mocked, and a mountain of harm he'd caused to countless lives. Emma visited every day after school, bringing drawings and stories that slowly rebuilt my shattered heart. She accepted me with a child's pure love, unaware of the years of rejection and pain. Sarah, my college Sarah, showed a grace I couldn't comprehend, never mentioning the past, simply allowing our daughter to form her own relationship with me. One night, tormented by pain, both physical and spiritual, I wheeled myself to the hospital chapel. It was empty except for an elderly janitor mopping the floor. As I sat there staring at the cross, the magnitude of my transformation hit me. 2 months ago, I would have scoffed at anyone seeking comfort in this room. Now I was here, broken and searching. "Sometimes the floor needs to be completely clean before you can see your reflection in it," the janitor said quietly, continuing his work. Something in his voice reminded me of Jesus' presence during my near-death experience. When I turned to respond, he was gone, leaving only the faint scent of that divine fragrance I remembered. The media circus intensified when I was discharged from the hospital. Reporters camped outside my Malibu home, one of the few assets Marcus hadn't managed to liquidate. Their questions were relentless. "Dr. Collins, how do you respond to allegations of medical malpractice? Is it true you deliberately targeted vulnerable LGBTQ youth? Have you really found religion, or is this another manipulation?" I had no answers for them. How could I explain that their questions seemed trivial compared to the ones I'd faced in that realm of light? How could I describe the profound shift in my soul to people looking for sensational headlines? The darkest moment came when I received a letter from Tyler's parents, the young trans man who'd taken his life after I'd exploited his vulnerability. They didn't rage or threaten legal action. Instead, they wrote about their son's faith in me, how he'd defended me to him, how he'd believed I was different from other doctors who'd dismissed him. Their forgiveness, offered through their pain, brought me to my knees. In that moment of complete brokenness, holding their letter, I finally understood what Jesus had shown me. My gift for transformation was real, but I'd used it to destroy rather than heal. My influence in the LGBTQ community had been genuine, but I'd wielded it for profit rather than support. My technical skills were God-given, but I'd turned them into weapons of harm. That night I prayed again, this time with words that came from the depths of my broken spirit. "Jesus, I don't know who I am anymore, but I know who I don't want to be. Help me find a way to make this right." My path to redemption began in an unexpected place, the courthouse, where I faced my accusers. Instead of fighting the lawsuits or defending my practices, I did something that shocked everyone. I confessed to everything. Every manipulated consultation, every unnecessary surgery, every exploited vulnerability, I laid it all bare. The man who did these things is dead, I told the stunned courtroom. He died for 7 minutes on Pacific Coast Highway, and the man who came back has a different purpose then. I did something even more unexpected. I offered to set up a foundation using every remaining asset I had, including my Malibu home, to provide reconstructive surgery for those who truly needed it, free of charge. The judge, clearly skeptical of my transformation, made it a condition of my reduced sentence. I would serve 5 years of probation, surrender my medical license, and devote all my resources to the foundation. The only surprising part of his ruling was the name he gave it, the Emma Collins Foundation for Healing, named after the little girl whose existence had saved my soul. Sarah, my college Sarah, became the foundation's first board member. Her expertise in nonprofit management, something I'd never known about her, proved invaluable. Together, we established clear guidelines. The foundation would focus on reconstructive surgery for accident victims, burn survivors, and transgender individuals who couldn't afford care. Every case would be reviewed by an ethics board that included both medical professionals and former patients. Emma, in her innocent wisdom, suggested we add a spiritual care component. When you fix people's outsides, she said during one of our daddy-daughter lunches, Jesus can help fix their insides too. We partnered with local churches and spiritual counselors of all faiths, offering emotional and spiritual support alongside physical healing. The LGBTQ community's response to my transformation was initially hostile. At my first public appearance at an LGBT health conference, someone threw a cup of coffee at me. "Traitor," they shouted, "found God and forgot your people." But when they saw that the foundation prioritized transgender health care and support for LGBTQ youth, attitudes slowly began to shift. Father Michael, the priest who'd visited me in the hospital, became an unexpected ally. He helped me navigate the delicate balance between my faith and my identity. God doesn't ask you to deny who you are, he counseled. He asks you to be who he created you to be, fully and authentically. The most challenging step was reaching out to my former patients. I started with personal letters acknowledging the harm I'd done, offering to connect them with legitimate surgeons who could correct my work. Many responded with anger, some with lawsuits, but a precious few responded with forgiveness. One of these was Jennifer, a former beauty queen I'd convinced needed 11 surgeries. She became our foundation's patient advocate, using her experience to help others avoid the traps I'd once set. "Your honesty about your transformation," she told me, "helps others find courage to face their own demons." The hardest visit was to Tyler's grave. His parents met me there, and together we prayed my first public prayer since returning to faith. We established a special fund in his name for transgender youth, ensuring they received ethical care and support rather than exploitation. My daughter Emma, now 8, became the heart of the foundation. She spent afternoons doing homework in our small office, charming patients with her innocent questions and pure acceptance. She had an uncanny ability to know exactly when someone needed a hug or a simple "Jesus loves you" reminder. Sarah watched our daughter's influence with quiet pride. Our relationship evolved into something neither of us had expected, a deep friendship built on shared purpose and redemption. We weren't romantic partners, but we were partners in healing, both our own past and others' futures. 1 year after the accident, we held a memorial service. Not for me, though I had died that day, but for all those I'd harmed through my practice. Former patients shared their stories. Family members spoke of loved ones lost to surgery addiction. Through tears and tributes, a community of healing began to form. "You know," Emma said as we left the service, holding my hand, "the angels must be really happy right now." When I asked why, she smiled with that divine wisdom children sometimes possess. "Because, Daddy, Jesus says there's more joy in heaven over one person who comes back than over 99 who never left." The path of redemption proved to be as challenging as it was rewarding. The LGBTQ community's initial hostility intensified when word spread about my newfound faith. I was disinvited from speaking engagements, removed from nonprofit boards, and labeled a religious turncoat by former allies. Online LGBTQ forums filled with debates about whether my transformation was genuine or just another manipulation? My first public appearance at a transgender healthcare conference was met with organized protests. Signs reading "conversion therapy" in designer clothes and "traitor to the community" greeted me at the entrance. Inside, when I tried to explain the Foundation's mission of ethical care and spiritual support, half the audience walked out. "You can't serve two masters," a prominent LGBTQ activist told me after the conference. "Either you're with us or you're with them," I responded with words that had come to me during prayer. "I serve one master now, and he teaches me to love everyone, including those who reject me." My quote was twisted in the media, portrayed as evidence of my religious brainwashing. The religious community proved equally challenging. Conservative churches dismissed my testimony, calling it a publicity stunt. "How can he claim to follow Christ while still identifying as gay?" they asked. Some suggested I needed conversion therapy. Others outright declared that my near-death experience must have been a demonic deception. Even Father Michael faced criticism for supporting me. His bishop questioned the wisdom of allowing a controversial figure to be associated with the church. But he stood firm, reminding his critics that Jesus himself was criticized for the company he kept. The financial challenges were daunting. Running a nonprofit foundation proved far more difficult than managing a profitable practice. Many potential donors were hesitant to associate with my controversial reputation. Grant applications were repeatedly rejected. Some nights I lay awake wondering if we could make payroll. Emma noticed my worry. "Jesus fed 5,000 people with just a little bread and fish," she reminded me over breakfast. "He can help us feed people's souls too." Her childlike faith often shamed my adult doubts. Sarah struggled with her own challenges. Some parents at Emma's school complained about their children associating with the daughter of that doctor. Career opportunities she'd worked hard for suddenly disappeared. Yet she remained steadfast, her quiet strength a constant reminder of the grace I'd been shown. The hardest blow came when my parents finally visited. They'd seen my interviews, read about the foundation, and decided to assess the sincerity of my conversion. Dad, still a Baptist pastor, spent our first dinner grilling me about theology, seemingly more interested in doctrinal correctness than the change in my heart. "But can you really be saved while continuing in your lifestyle?" Mom asked tearfully. The pain in her voice matched the ache in my heart. "Mom," I responded, "Jesus didn't ask me to stop being who I am. He asked me to stop being who I'm not." The medical community's response was mixed. Some former colleagues supported our mission, volunteering their services to the foundation. Others distanced themselves, fearful of association with my scandal. A few became active opponents, writing articles questioning the ethics of mixing healthcare with spiritual support. One particularly scathing piece in a medical journal accused us of exploiting vulnerable patients with religious propaganda. The irony of being accused of exploitation for offering free, ethical care wasn't lost on me. But now, instead of fighting back with lawsuits and PR campaigns, I responded with an invitation to visit our clinic and meet our patients. Through it all, Emma remained my anchor to grace. When protesters gathered outside our clinic, she suggested we bring them cookies and water. When hate mail arrived, she turned the envelopes into origami cranes to help angry words fly away. Her simple faith cut through the complexity adults created. The foundation's work itself presented daily challenges. Each patient's story reopened wounds of my past actions. Every consultation reminded me of times I'd exploited similar vulnerabilities. The weight of redemption proved heavier than the weight of sin had ever been. Yet in these challenges I found a strange peace. Each difficulty seemed to carry its own blessing. The community's rejection taught me humility. Financial struggles taught me faith. Family tensions taught me patience. Professional criticism taught me to value truth over reputation. Remember, Father Michael counseled during a particularly difficult week. The cross wasn't comfortable, but it was necessary. Your discomfort is part of your testimony. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, eerily similar to the day of my accident, when Marcus walked back into my life. I was reviewing patient files in our modest foundation office when Sarah Clinic Sarah, not Emma's mother, appeared in my doorway, her face pale. "Zach, you need to come to the waiting room." Marcus looked nothing like the polished, confident man who'd planned to marry me 2 years ago. His designer suits had been replaced by casual clothes that hung loose on his gaunt frame. His perfectly maintained hair had gone gray at the temples. But it was his eyes that shocked me most. The ambitious sparkle had been replaced by a haunted desperation. "They gave me 6 months," he said without preamble. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer." Quite the cosmic joke, isn't it? His bitter laugh turned into a cough that shook his entire body. I should have felt triumph. Here was the man who'd betrayed me, who'd orchestrated my downfall, now brought low by circumstances beyond his control. Instead, I felt a profound sadness and something else I hadn't expected: compassion. "The money's all gone," he continued, staring at his shaking hands. "Bad investments, worse partners. Turns out I'm not as clever as I thought. The private hospitals won't touch me without insurance and the public waiting lists." He trailed off, leaving the implication hanging. Before I could respond, Emma burst into the office, returning from school as she did every Tuesday. She stopped short at the sight of Marcus, tilting her head in that way she had when trying to understand something complex. "Are you the man who hurt my daddy?" she asked directly. Marcus flinched as if she'd struck him. "Because Jesus says we should forgive people who hurt us, but it's okay if it takes time." Her words hung in the air between us, a child's simple wisdom cutting through years of betrayal and bitterness. Marcus looked at her, then at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. "This is your daughter, the one from the accident?" I nodded, watching as he processed this piece of information. The little girl, he couldn't finish the sentence. The full weight of his actions, not just the betrayal and theft, but the attempted murder that had nearly killed an innocent child, seemed to crush him. He collapsed into a chair, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Emma did what came naturally to her. She walked over and put her small hand on his shoulder. "It's okay to cry," she said softly. "Daddy cried a lot when Jesus helped him get better." In that moment, watching my daughter comfort the man who tried to destroy me, I heard Jesus' words from my near-death experience: "Your gift for transformation is real," but now I understood true transformation wasn't about changing bodies, but healing souls. "We have a patient support program," I heard myself saying. "Complete care, medical, emotional, spiritual, if you want it." No one is turned away. Marcus looked up, his face twisted with shame and hope. "Why would you help me?" he whispered. "After everything I did?" "Because 2 years ago I died for 7 minutes," I replied. "And in those minutes I learned that love is not about deserving, it's about choosing. I'm choosing to love you, Marcus, even if I can never trust you again." Emma, with a child's perfect timing, added, "And Jesus loves you too, even if you're scared to love him back yet." That evening, after we'd gotten Marcus settled into our patient housing program, I sat with Emma in the hospital chapel. "Are you sad about your friend?" she asked, swinging her legs on the pew. "Yes," I admitted, "but I'm grateful too. God keeps giving me chances to practice what he taught me." She nodded sagely. "Maybe that's why he let your friend get sick, so you could show him what real love looks like out of the mouths of babes indeed." The next few weeks were a crash course in practicing what I preached. Marcus's care team included several doctors he'd helped betray. Some refused to work with him initially, but gradually, as they watched him struggle with both the cancer and his remorse, hearts began to soften. The Foundation's board was divided about helping him. "He nearly killed you," Jennifer reminded me. "He would have killed your daughter," but when I shared Emma's response, the debate ended. We couldn't preach transformation while denying its possibility to anyone. Marcus's story, against all expectations, became the catalyst for our Foundation's wider acceptance. When word spread that we were providing care for the man who had betrayed us, people began to look at our work differently. The media, always hungry for a compelling narrative, latched onto the story of forgiveness and transformation. A prominent LGBTQ magazine ran a feature titled "Beyond Labels: When Faith Meets Identity." The article detailed my journey from celebrity surgeon to spiritual seeker, focusing on how our foundation served everyone regardless of their background. They interviewed transgender patients who spoke about receiving respectful, ethical care alongside spiritual support that didn't demand they change who they were. Dr. Collins taught me that God loves me as I am, one young trans woman testified. My transition wasn't about rejecting God's creation, but about aligning my outside with the person He created me to be inside. Her words became a bridge between communities that had seemed irreconcilably divided. Religious organizations that had once condemned us began to take notice. when a conservative Christian network sent a reporter to expose our dangerous mixing of faith and perversion, they instead discovered a place of authentic healing. The reporter's tearful interview with Marcus, who spoke about finding God's love through the forgiveness of those he'd hurt, went viral. My parents' transformation was more gradual but equally profound. They visited again, this time to stay for a month. Dad, still struggling with his theological certainties, watched as Emma led our morning prayer sessions with patience. "She has more faith than I do," he admitted one evening, his voice rough with emotion. Mom found her place helping in our family support program, counseling parents struggling to accept their LGBTQ children. "I was so busy trying to change you," she told me, "that I forgot to love you. I won't make that mistake with other parents' children." The medical community's perspective shifted when our patient outcomes data was published. Our combination of ethical medical care and spiritual support showed significantly better recovery rates and patient satisfaction than traditional approaches. Major hospitals began sending representatives to study our model. Even the lawsuits that had threatened to destroy us became testimonies of transformation. Former patients who had sued us were invited to join our patient advocacy board. Many accepted, turning their pain into purpose by helping ensure others received ethical care. The foundation expanded, opening branches in other cities. Each location maintained our core principle: complete care for body, mind, and spirit, offered with unconditional love and respect. We partnered with both LGBTQ organizations and religious institutions, building bridges where walls had once stood. Marcus's declining health brought unexpected healing to our community. Patients and staff members who had initially refused to work with him found themselves moved by his genuine repentance. He spent his lucid moments counseling others struggling with addiction to power and success, sharing how his pursuit of wealth had nearly destroyed his soul. Emma, now 9, continued to be our heart. She started a kindness club at her school, teaching other children about acceptance and forgiveness. When asked why she forgave Marcus so easily, her answer made headlines: because everyone is just learning how to love better, and sometimes people make big mistakes while they're learning. The local LGBT Youth Center, which had once banned me from their premises, invited me to speak about faith, identity, and authentic living. The QA session lasted for hours, with young people asking honest questions about how to reconcile their sexuality or gender identity with their spiritual beliefs. Both Sarahs became symbols of different kinds of grace. College Sarah showed how forgiveness could heal decades of pain. Clinic Sarah demonstrated how professional respect could transcend personal differences. Together, they helped create a workplace culture that valued authenticity over conformity. Father Michael's support was finally vindicated when his bishop visited our foundation. After spending a day observing our work, the bishop wrote a letter endorsing our ministry as a modern example of Christ's healing work. Several other religious leaders followed suit, helping to legitimize our approach to faith-affirming LGBTQ healthcare. Through it all, we maintained our focus on individual transformation rather than institutional validation. Each person who found healing in our clinic, whether physical or spiritual, became part of our extended family. We celebrated their victories, supported their struggles, and honored their journeys. One morning, as I watched the sunrise from our clinic's small chapel, I found Marcus there, wrapped in a hospital blanket. "I understand now," he said quietly, "what you experienced in those 7 minutes. God's love, it's overwhelming when you finally let it in." The cost of transformation manifested in ways I never anticipated. My former life had dissolved completely: the mansions, sports cars, and private jets replaced by a modest apartment above the clinic. The designer wardrobe gave way to simple clothes, my Rolex traded for a basic watch that Emma had given me for Father's Day. The financial sacrifices were the easiest to bear. What cut deeper was the ongoing social isolation. Despite our foundation's growing acceptance, many of my former friends remained distant. High society gatherings, charity balls, and medical conferences that had once been my natural habitat now felt like memories from another life. At one former colleague's wedding, I arrived to find my invitation had been lost to polite fiction to avoid uncomfortable explanations to other guests. Professional respect, once automatic due to my position and wealth, had to be earned anew. Young doctors who had once competed for my attention now viewed me with skepticism or pity. The medical board, while allowing our foundation to operate, kept us under intense scrutiny. Every decision, every procedure, every patient outcome was examined with microscopic attention. Dating became complicated in ways I hadn't expected. The gay community often viewed my faith with suspicion, while religious men struggled with my unchanged sexuality. "You can't be both," one potential partner said before ending our coffee date. "Eventually you'll have to choose." I chose authenticity, even if it meant being alone. The hardest sacrifice was watching how my choices affected Emma. Despite her school's progressive reputation, some parents quietly steered their children away from playdates with the complicated doctor's daughter. Emma never complained, but I saw how she lingered at the edges of playground groups, caught between worlds just as I was. Yet in these sacrifices I found an unexpected peace. Each loss seemed to create space for something more valuable. The quieter life allowed more time with Emma. Professional isolation led to deeper, more authentic relationships with our Foundations team. Even my singleness became a testimony to the possibility of being both faithful and true to oneself. One evening, as Emma and I walked along the beach near our modest new home, she asked, "Daddy, do you miss being rich?" Looking at her silhouette against the sunset, remembering the emptiness of my former wealth, I could answer honestly, "No, sweetheart, I have everything I need right here." Marcus's final weeks came faster than anyone expected. The cancer, aggressive and merciless, consumed him with frightening speed. I spent many nights by his hospital bed watching the man I had once planned to marry fade away, our past both haunting and healing us. "I tried to kill you," he confessed one night, his voice barely a whisper. "Not just with the car, I wanted to destroy everything you were. The funny thing is, I succeeded, just not in the way I intended." He managed a weak smile. "You died, but what came back was something better." Emma visited him daily, bringing her homework and childish chatter into his increasingly dark world. She would sit cross-legged on the end of his bed, telling him stories about Jesus and heaven with the unshakable certainty of a child. Marcus would listen, tears rolling silently down his hollowed cheeks. The night before he died, he asked for baptism. Father Michael came, filling our small hospital chapel with the scent of incense and sacred oils. The man who had once mocked all things spiritual now wept as the water touched his forehead. "I believe," he whispered, looking not at the priest but at Emma, "I understand now what you've been trying to tell me, little one." His last words to me, spoken hours before he slipped into his final sleep, were both confession and prophecy. "You know why I really hated your transformation. Because it meant that change was possible and I was too afraid to change. But you showed me love is stronger than fear." When he finally left us, it was peacefully, with Emma holding one hand and me the other. She said she saw angels in the room, and for the first time in my life, I didn't doubt such a vision. The monitors fell silent, and in that sacred moment, I felt the same presence I had experienced in my own near-death encounter. We buried him in a simple ceremony, attended by Foundation staff and patients whose lives he had touched in his final months. Emma insisted on releasing white doves at the grave to help his soul fly to Jesus, she explained. As the birds spiraled upward into the brilliant blue sky, I realized that Marcus's death, like my own near death, had been another kind of transformation. After Marcus's death, I spent countless nights in our clinic's chapel, wrestling with the profound purpose behind everything that had happened. The pattern was becoming clear. Every loss had led to greater gain. Every ending had opened new beginnings. Every death, both literal and metaphorical, had brought new life. One particular night, as I sat in the quiet chapel, that familiar divine presence filled the room. This time, though, it wasn't accompanied by visions or voices. Instead, understanding seemed to flow directly into my heart, illuminating connections I had missed before. The accident that should have killed me had instead united me with the daughter I'd rejected. Marcus's betrayal, meant to destroy me, had stripped away everything that kept me from my true purpose. Even my public humiliation had become a testimony that spoke to both the LGBTQ and religious communities in ways my former success never could. Emma, with her child's insight, had seen it first. "Daddy," she'd said months ago, "maybe God let all the bad things happen so you could help people who are hurting like you were." Her words echoed the deeper truth I was now seeing. My gift for transformation had needed to be transformed itself. The clearest evidence came from our Foundation's work. Every patient who walked through our doors carried wounds similar to those I'd once inflicted, not just physical imperfections, but deeper injuries to their souls. My past experience as both victimizer and healed victim gave me unique insight into their pain. Our transgender patients in particular helped me understand divine purpose in new ways. Their journey of aligning their external selves with their internal truth paralleled my own spiritual journey. Through them, I learned that authentic transformation wasn't about becoming someone else, but about becoming more fully who you were created to be. The religious community's gradual acceptance of our work revealed another layer of purpose. We weren't just helping individuals, we were helping bridge a divide that had seemed insurmountable. When conservative churches began referring LGBTQ members to us for counseling, knowing they would receive both spiritual and emotional support without judgment, I saw God's hand in even the darkest parts of my past. Marcus's final transformation became part of this larger picture. His death, like his betrayal, served a purpose beyond itself. Through his journey from betrayer to beloved brother in Christ, he showed that no one was beyond redemption. His story became especially powerful for patients struggling with their own past actions. My parents' evolution revealed yet another facet of divine purpose. Their journey from rejection to acceptance helped other religious parents navigate similar struggles. Mom's weekly support group for parents of LGBTQ children became one of our most powerful ministries, healing family bonds that had seemed permanently broken. The loss of my medical license, which had once seemed like the end of my calling, proved to be just the beginning. Unable to perform surgeries myself, I instead focused on creating ethical guidelines for cosmetic procedures and advocating for patients' spiritual and emotional well-being alongside their physical transformation. Emma's role in all of this couldn't be ignored. Her unconditional love and simple faith had become the heart of our foundation's approach. She taught me and through me our entire team that love doesn't require understanding, it just requires showing up and staying present. One morning as I watched the sunrise through the chapel's stained glass windows, I finally grasped the full scope of what Jesus had shown me during those 7 minutes of death. My gift for transformation hadn't been wrong, it had just been misdirected. Like a sculptor who had been using his chisel to wound rather than create, I had needed to learn the true purpose of my calling. All things work together for good. Father Michael had often quoted, "For those who love God and are called according to his purpose." Now I understood not just as a theological concept, but as a lived reality. Every piece of my broken past was being used to create something beautiful and new. The depth of my personal transformation became most apparent in the small moments, the daily choices and reactions that showed how fundamentally I had changed. Where I had once measured success in dollars and social media followers, I now found joy in the quiet victories of our patients' healing journeys. My former perfectionism, which had driven me to reshape faces and bodies relentlessly, transformed into an appreciation for human imperfection. I learned to see beauty in the scars that told stories of survival, in the laugh lines that spoke of joy, in the physical features that made each person uniquely themselves. The change in my relationship with the LGBTQ community was particularly profound. Instead of being a celebrated icon of success, I became something more authentic, a wounded healer who understood both struggle and redemption. Young people started coming to me not for physical transformation, but for guidance on integrating their identity with their faith. My approach to spirituality evolved from the rigid certainties I'd grown up with into something more nuanced and inclusive. I learned that God's love couldn't be contained by human doctrines or denominations. The chapel in our clinic welcomed people of all faiths or none, offering a space for healing that transcended religious boundaries. Emma's influence on my transformation continued to amaze me. Through her eyes, I learned to see miracles in everyday moments: a patient's first genuine smile, a family's reconciliation, a skeptic's first tentative prayer. Her childlike faith challenged my adult tendency to complicate simple truths. The way I handled conflict changed dramatically. When protesters still occasionally gathered outside our clinic, I no longer saw enemies to be defeated, but wounded souls needing healing. Following Emma's example, we really did bring them cookies and water, turning confrontations into conversations. My relationship with Sarah, Emma's mother, deepened into something neither of us had expected. While we didn't rekindle our romantic relationship, we formed a different kind of partnership, united in our dedication to Emma and to the work of healing. Her forgiveness of my past actions taught me daily lessons in grace. Even my appearance reflected the internal changes. The designer suits and perfectly maintained image gave way to a more natural presence. Patients often commented that I seemed more approachable, more real. One young transgender patient said, "At best you look like someone who understands pain and found peace anyway." The most surprising transformation was in my understanding of love. As a gay man who had found authentic faith, I learned that God's love was far bigger than human categories or restrictions. My experience helped others caught between identity and belief find their own path to authentic spirituality. Father Michael observed that my greatest transformation was in my capacity for joy. Despite the challenges and sacrifices, I found myself laughing more, loving more freely, living more fully than I ever had in my wealthy but empty former life. The ultimate evidence of transformation came in forgiveness, not just receiving it or offering it to others, but finally extending it to myself. The guilt of my past actions had been replaced by a quiet acceptance that God could use even my mistakes for good. One evening, as Emma and I walked on the beach near our modest apartment, she stopped and looked at me intently. "You're different now, Daddy," she said thoughtfully. "Your eyes look like they're smiling even when your mouth isn't." In that moment, watching the sunset with my daughter, I realized that true transformation isn't about becoming someone else, it's about becoming who you were always meant to be. 3 years after my near-death experience, our foundation hosted a remarkable gathering. In the same ballroom where I had once planned to celebrate my wedding to Marcus, we brought together an unlikely assembly: LGBTQ youth and their religious parents, former patients and their families, medical professionals and spiritual leaders. The event wasn't a fundraiser or a medical conference, but what Emma had dubbed a Love Like Jesus celebration. The idea had come from her after she'd witnessed a particularly moving reconciliation between a transgender teen and her evangelical father. "We should have a party," she'd declared, "where everyone can see how God's love makes people whole." Both Sarahs had taken her simple suggestion and transformed it into reality. College Sarah's organizational skills and Clinic Sarah's medical expertise combined to create an event that celebrated healing in all its forms. The guest list itself was a testimony to transformation. My parents sat with LGBTQ couples. Conservative pastors mingled with transgender activists. Former patients who had once sued me now served on our board. My father, to everyone's surprise, asked to give the opening prayer. Standing at the podium, his voice thick with emotion, he deviated from his prepared text. "Lord, 3 years ago I thought I had lost my son. Instead, you showed me that I had never really known him. Thank you for giving us all a second chance at love." The evening's testimonies told stories of multiple transformations. A transgender woman spoke about finding acceptance in her Baptist church through our foundation's advocacy. A former beauty queen shared how learning to love her natural face had freed her to help others. A religious mother described how our support group had helped her move from rejecting her gay son to becoming an advocate for LGBTQ youth. Emma, now 10, insisted on sharing her own testimony. Standing on a chair to reach the microphone, she spoke with a child's direct wisdom. "Some people think you have to choose between being yourself and loving Jesus, but my daddy showed me that Jesus loves us exactly as we are and helps us become who we're supposed to be." The most moving moment came when Tyler's parents presented our foundation with a gift, a scholarship fund in their son's name for LGBTQ youth seeking ethical medical care. Our son's death could have been the end of our story, his father said. Instead, through this foundation, it became the beginning of many new stories of hope. My own speech was brief. Standing before the gathered crowd, I shared the truth that had emerged from my 7 minutes of death. True transformation isn't about changing who you are. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. Sometimes that means changing your body to match your soul. Sometimes it means changing your heart to match God's love. Always it means embracing the divine purpose hidden within your pain. The evening ended with an unexpected gesture. Representatives from both the LGBTQ community and religious organizations announced a joint initiative, a national network of clinics based on our foundation's model of integrated physical, emotional, and spiritual care. As I watched the diverse crowd mingling, laughing, and sharing stories, I felt that familiar divine presence, not as dramatic as during my near-death experience, but just as real. This, I realized, was what Jesus had been showing me all along: love that transcends boundaries, healing that goes deeper than skin, transformation that touches soul and body alike. Emma, tired from the evening's excitement, curled up in my lap as the event wound down. "Daddy," she murmured sleepily. "I think Jesus is really happy right now." Looking around the room at the unlikely family we had become, I had to agree. If you're reading this, perhaps you're wondering why I'm sharing my story. It's not to condemn my past or glorify my transformation. It's because during those 7 minutes of death, Jesus showed me something too important to keep to myself. Real transformation, the kind that touches souls, comes through love, not judgment. To my LGBTQ family who feel rejected by faith, your identity is not a barrier to God's love. I once used my platform to mock belief, thinking I was defending our community. Now I understand that authentic faith doesn't require you to be anyone other than who you truly are. The divine love I encountered in death embraces all of who you are, not just parts deemed acceptable by human judgment. To religious communities struggling with these issues, the Jesus I met didn't ask me to change my orientation before loving me. He loved me first completely, and that love transformed everything else. When you demand people change before accepting them, you're putting human conditions on divine love. To those in the medical community, true healing can't be measured just in physical changes. Every patient who walks through your door carries invisible wounds alongside their visible ones. The integration of spiritual and emotional care isn't alternative medicine, it's essential medicine. To parents wrestling with accepting their LGBTQ children, your child's identity isn't a rejection of your faith. Emma taught me that God's love is big enough to embrace all of who we are. Your role isn't to change your child, but to love them as completely as God does. Emma, now entering her teenage years, continues to be my greatest teacher. When I recently struggled with a particularly difficult case, she reminded me of something profound. "Daddy, remember when Jesus showed you how much He loves you? Maybe that's all some people need to know, they're loved that much." Our foundation has expanded beyond anything I could have imagined. We now have clinics in 12 cities, each offering the same integrated approach to healing. The waiting rooms are filled with an unlikely mix: transgender teens and their conservative parents, religious leaders seeking understanding, medical professionals learning to treat the whole person. Sarah, Emma's mother, married a kind youth pastor last spring. At the wedding, Emma served as both bridesmaid and flower girl, insisting on doing both. Watching her scatter rose petals down the aisle in her bridesmaid's dress, I saw living proof that love multiplies when we share it. Marcus's story continues to touch lives through a program we created in his memory, helping people trapped in cycles of ambition and emptiness find their way to authentic purpose. His last words, "Love is stronger than fear," became the program's motto. As for me, I finally understand what Jesus meant when He said my gift for transformation was real but misdirected. True transformation isn't about fixing what's wrong. With people, it's about helping them discover what's right within them, what's been there all along, waiting to be revealed through love. I still identify as gay. I still face criticism from both religious conservatives and LGBTQ activists who think I've betrayed their cause. But I've found peace in living authentically before both God and man. My life has become a testimony that you don't have to choose between your identity and your faith, you just have to choose love. If there's one message I want to leave you with, it's this: no matter who you are, what you've done, or what's been done to you, there's a love big enough to heal you completely. I discovered it in 7 minutes of death. You don't have to die to find it. The light that filled that divine space still fills our clinic's chapel, our consultation rooms, our support groups, and my heart. It's the light of love that transforms without destroying, that heals without demanding change, that accepts while inviting growth. It's available to you too, just as you are, right where you are. Remember, true transformation isn't about becoming someone else, it's about becoming who you were always meant to be. If this story of transformation and divine love has touched your heart, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences and reflections could be the light someone else needs today. Support our mission of sharing stories of hope and healing by subscribing to our channel, and help us reach others by sharing this video with friends and family who might need to hear this message. Every like, share, and comment helps spread the truth that authentic transformation is possible through unconditional love. Together we can build a community where everyone feels seen, accepted, and loved.